And we're back in the saddle. I'm just going to assume that the audio is okay this time around, but you never know. I switched up my microphone, switched up the cord that connects the microphone into the computer. Don't know what else I can really do at this point to ensure maximum audio quality. So if somebody can just confirm to me that the audio is good, that would be helpful. Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Late night streaming, you know the deal. Get a lot of nice feedback from people who watch this stuff, mostly at Tulsi related events, frankly, which, is all good. Um, okay, so it should come as no surprise that Tulsi was once again effectively screwed over by the Democratic Party establishment. Breaking news, right? It happens over and over and over again in a variety of different manifestations. Tonight may seem insignificant in what they did, but it's significant because it just underscores and confirms what is already a broad breadth of evidence showing that this is what they are intentionally doing. Um, so there was this dinner held in Manchester, New Hampshire tonight ahead of the primary. It's sort of a annual or a quadrennial institution in New Hampshire to hold a dinner in honor of Jean Shaheen, the New Hampshire senator, in the Southern New Hampshire State University Arena in downtown Manchester. I was at this event last primary, embedded with some Bernie people, where there was some contestation about the validity of what was going on back then. But today, at least with regard to Tulsi, what they did was they scheduled her to go dead last in the order of speakers. So she didn't end up going on stage to give her remarks until after 10 o'clock. And who did they? So all the presidential candidates basically spoke at this event, which is supposed to be like an homage to the state Democratic Party, where they showcase all their congressmen and senators and such, while there is national attention on New Hampshire. Yeah, there was a hair sticking out of the mic because this particular mic was in my bag for a while, so I guess hair snuck in there. I don't know why I'm revealing this, but I guess some people inferred that from my picking at the mic. So you were correct. So the state Democratic Party essentially determines what order the candidates will speak in. And who went first? Of course, it was Pete. And I was told on good authority that Pete was not originally scheduled to go first, which is the most coveted time spot. It's when most people are tuned in to the extent that they're tuning in. It's when you have the most people in the arena because a lot of people leave once their preferred candidate speaks. But they were all there for Pete. And so Pete got to go first. He was interrupted or drowned out a little bit by the Bernie crowd who chanted Wall Street Pete, Wall Street Pete, and I even heard some scattered boos. So that was amusing. And Pete apparently maneuvered to get into the first and most desirable spot. Notably, one of the candidates, or one of the people who sort of introduced the proceedings, who announced that this dinner was on and welcomed everybody, was Representative Ann Custer of New Hampshire, who is a Pete endorser. And she didn't just give a neutral speech, which is, you'd think, what her capacity would be in as sort of a officer presiding over the ceremonies here. Rather, at the end of her introductory remarks, what she said was, And I can't, something to the effect of, I'm paraphrasing, and I can't wait for the next Democrat to move into the White House, uh, in 2021 with his husband. So obviously she left no doubt as to who she was sort of framing the event to be in support of. Okay, interrupting with a live chat. Some Freebird asks, "Did I see Bernie's campaign said Trump was wrong? The DNC ain't rigging it in 2016 again." Did not see that. Send me specifically what you're referring to, and I'll look at it. Um, so Pete goes first, right? And they give Tulsi the obviously least desirable slot, and they put her after Deval Patrick and Michael Bennett. Now, Deval Patrick and Michael Bennett have almost zero support at all in New Hampshire, and they have never registered virtually any support. Tulsi, meanwhile, has been in New Hampshire off and on for basically a year, more than a year, in fact. And she's been here every single day, essentially, since December. That's why I've been here. And she gets pretty substantial crowds. I mean, not Bernie or Trump levels, but enough that it's formidable. Today in Rochester, she had one of the biggest crowds that I've seen so far at a fairly small venue. It was an Elks Lodge in Rochester, and she was just endorsed today, actually, by a former New Hampshire state representative named Chris Roberts, who is the first Black state committee chairman in New Hampshire, and served on the veterans sort of subcommittee for the Obama campaign in 2008. So, look, that's not the most notable endorsement in the world, but it's something. And it's just not reflected at all in terms of how the Democratic Party institutions, along with their allies in the corporate media, treat Tulsi. As we know, they blocked her from the CNN town halls on totally spurious grounds. They blocked her from the debate last night on spurious grounds, even though a poll came out today showing her ahead of 3 people who were in the debate. Those being Yang, Steyer, and Klobuchar. Tulsi polled ahead of all 3 of them in a poll published today by CNN. And so, they just continue this routine by putting her, more or less in the dead of night when almost everybody's tuned out, when the arena empties out. So she has nobody to talk to, or vastly fewer to talk to than she would have had if they gave her a speaking slot that was in line with the amount of support she's demonstrated in New Hampshire relative to other candidates. Not too much to ask, I wouldn't think. So the only thing that you can conclude here is that there's active malevolence, active efforts at marginalization. That's what they are doing. That is the inescapable conclusion that you have to make based on the totality of this evidence. And I'm not saying that she's a front runner. I'm not saying that she's got a spectacularly good chance of winning the nomination. I'm saying that, relative to the support that she's already demonstrated, they're not even giving her a fair place. And you know what? If people don't like or are annoyed by my obvious focus on Tulsi, I don't care, because there is just some basic principles here that are being transgressed that not enough people in the media will ever talk about, because they don't like Tulsi for a variety of political reasons. They have animus toward her, and you can't rely on them to depict the situation with any semblance of fair-mindedness. So, the speech that she did give, and it wasn't so much a speech as sort of just a handful of remarks because the time was limited. Um, but she did something that was a little atypical in that she sort of cast herself as the best candidate to beat Trump. She's talked about that off and on, but she hasn't done it that as explicitly as she did tonight that I've seen, and I've seen most of it. um, so the response that she got from the crowd of assembled Democrats was relatively positive because how could they boo, you know, somebody who's calling for the defeat of Trump, which she does anyway. I mean, the narrative that you hear off and on, a little less so now, but still, it pops up. How she's like this stealth Trump supporter and she wants to help Trump. I mean, there was never any evidence for that at all. And it's undermined by her declaring her firm belief in the necessity of beating Trump. I mean, do you know any secret Republicans, which he also gets accused of, who over and over again are calling for the defeat of Trump? They just don't like that she doesn't speak about Trump in these histrionic culture war style terms that is so commonplace and expected in sort of mainstream Democratic circles. So that unwillingness on her part to sort of indulge in that rhetoric leads them to have this unfounded suspicion of her, even though her approach to criticizing Trump has always been substantive and rational, which I kind of think is the more fruitful way to oppose Trump, and I've always thought that. But that's not what most Democrats are interested in. Um, so I was there when she was delivering her remarks, and I heard behind me somebody really getting angry and shouting and booing, and I turned and looked, and it was a guy in a Pete shirt, of course, and the guy had to be sort of like shushed and almost restrained or escorted away by another Pete supporter who was like, "All right, you're getting a little crazy, buddy." So there were sporadic bursts of anger when she was there, but overall that the reception was relatively positive and respectful. But then again, most of the crowd had already emptied out at that point. So you're not going to have the most diehard supporters necessarily lingering behind to just sit and watch like a Michael Bennett or a DeBell Patrick or a Tulsi. So it's when I say rigged, again, uh, there are multiple levels on which you can assert that a process is rigged. With her specifically, obviously, it's been rigged against her in about 1,000 different ways. The Iowa caucus was rigged in that there were manipulative and deceitful tactics employed to depict the outcome or quasi outcome in Iowa. Uh, the way that the media plays favorites without any regard for any kind of neutral or objective criteria is indicative of rigging, and so on and so forth. I just tweeted a little clip from a video, I didn't see this in person when I was there. Um, I guess I don't know. I glanced away or something. But as Tulsi was exiting the stage, there was a group of Tulsi supporters who were sitting there cheering for her, and she went kind of shook their hands and stuff. And then she turned to her side, and there was still some leftover Warren supporters there. And one of the Warren supporters, clearly identified as a Warren supporter because he had the bright teal Warren shirt on. The guy, very conspicuously extends his hand for a handshake for Tulsi, and then when she goes to shake his hand, he fakes it. He fakes her out and removes his hand, and I guess he thought he was real clever and cool by doing that. And if you watch the clip, you could see like one of the girls who's with him going like this, "Ooh." So that those kinds of expressions of animosity are expected. But then again, one thing that doesn't get really relate about Tulsi's appeal, and I did mention this in my my Nation piece from Thursday, which I've been promoting, is that when just sort of your standard generic Democrats do sort of encounter her in person, the reaction is largely positive because most of what she advocates are in line with progressive democratic values. She just communicates them in a different way and has a different sort of framing on how she uh, promotes her political vision. Super chatter Estev08 asks, "What were your thoughts about her Rush Limbaugh tweet?" I'm not going to get bent out of shape about somebody offering well wishes to somebody who is diagnosed with advanced or terminal cancer. So that's fine with me. I separate that, which is just sort of a basic, decent human thing to do, from Trump honoring Rush Limbaugh as a national hero of sorts in the middle of the State of the Union, as though he were like John Glenn or a some kind of person who had exhibited really valor or something. I know the Presidential Medal of Freedom is given to civilians. I made a joke during the State of the Union that, oh, I said something like, I didn't know Rush Limbaugh had led our troops to victory in battle. And then, the right wing media content creators on Twitter who occasionally get angry at me swarmed in and said, "Oh, he didn't know that the Medal of Honor, that the Presidential Medal of Freedom is a civilian award." No, idiot. I did know that. That's why I made a joke. I didn't literally think that Rush Limbaugh was being awarded with a medal for military valor. I was mocking the spectacle of Rush Limbaugh being treated as though he's this national hero by having his own segment in the State of the Union. So, sort of touting and valorizing Rush Limbaugh like Trump did is different than just extending well wishes to somebody who's been diagnosed with cancer, because you're not thereby endorsing his political agenda. And Trump did that. So I have no issue with the Rush Limbaugh tweet, even though I think the Rush Limbaugh is very insidious in many ways. But I also understand that a lot of people have a deep emotional attachment to Rush Limbaugh. And if you can connect with those people on a humane level by simply offering uh, good thoughts in the wake of a, I guess, terminal cancer diagnosis, then that's fine, because you want to. You're not conceding anything politically by doing that. You're just being humane. But yeah, I would love to find out who that smart aleck Warren supporter was who thought that he could get a viral moment by faking Tulsi out on a handshake. I'd like to know a little bit more about that fella. So I mean, I would have tracked him down, frankly, but just didn't see it at the time. Somebody asked, has Limbaugh ever advocated against war? No. I mean, he's probably, since Trump was elected, he's probably mimicked or echoed. I mean, all Rush Limbaugh really does is he's just a mouthpiece for whatever the prevailing Republican orthodoxies are. He propagandizes on behalf of the mainstream Republican Party. And how you do that as a Republican sort of infotainment superstar is you sort of posture as being against the Republican establishment, even though the Republican establishment does whatever you want for the most part, because you want that edge. You want to feel as though you're a dissent. You want to portray yourself as a dissenter of sorts when you're not at all. And Rush Limbaugh gained prominence in the early '90s. That was sort of when he reached his apex, by every day bellowing about how great the first Gulf War was, and he would mock and ridicule anybody who opposed that. Um, and he did the same thing with Iraq, you know. And to the, I'm not a daily listener, but to the extent that his sentiments have shifted, it's just because he's sort of moving along with the center of gravity in the Republican Party, not because he had any kind of genuine revelation. So he's a talented broadcaster, obviously. That's why he's one of the most popular radio figures ever. But again, just sort of insidious on many levels. And I'm not saying that from a standpoint of, oh, he makes fun of people and he does mean jokes and he's crass and crude. No, it's just what he represents politically is crass and crude, and the function that he's had over decades is crass and crude. And I wouldn't say that for any conservative. I say that for people who are just party line partisan conservatives who don't actually present any novel insights. They just reinforce whatever the prevailing Republican dogma is, and you got plenty of those people on the who do the same thing referred to the Democratic Party as well. So it's not a strictly GOP phenomenon. It's just that's what he sort of made his name on. Let me see here. Oh yeah, I had a piece today on my good friend Tom Steyer. At the Democratic dinner tonight, they were passing out these. Let me show you. I don't even know what you call it. These cardboard cutouts with Tom's smiling face on it, as if anybody would ever like earnestly flaunt those things. So I took one for comedic value. Let me see if you can see that. Yeah, so I took a quasi selfie with it. And sorry if I'm overusing the word quasi, but it's actually pretty useful. Yeah, so of course they gave Steyer a far better slot than Tulsi, even though he's spending millions of dollars, and Tulsi consistently pulls ahead of him in New Hampshire. But regardless, one thing that's annoyed me recently is how Steyer has kind of morphed into this figure who's seen as somewhat benign and friendly and like a funny sidekick for Bernie in particular, because he's had a couple of these like cutesy viral moments with him, like when they were dancing together awkwardly at the Martin Luther King Day celebration in South Carolina, or when Steyer infamously kind of like inserted himself into the exchange between Warren and Bernie when they were accusing each other of lying on the debate stage. And Steyer has kind of embraced this role and tried to like, hey, you know, I'm just Tom. I'm just hanging out here. I mean, that's his shtick, and it bothers me because Tom Steyer launched his campaign on what I see to be fraudulent grounds. In that, Tom Steyer in October of 2017 launched the organization Need to Impeach, which was the most active pro-impeachment pressure group. And what this group essentially was a marketing and data collecting operation for Tom Steyer. And it was like a shadow presidential campaign for him because it allowed him to collect massive amounts of data from people who signed up for the pro-impeachment organization because they were mad about Trump and they felt like, oh, we need this groundswell of pro-impeachment attitude to get Trump out of office. And the main beneficiary of that was not the opposition to Trump, it was Tom Steyer. So Tom Steyer had flirted with running for president, said that he wouldn't do it, and kept the Need for Impeach to organization going, collecting lots of data, which is extremely valuable for a presidential campaign because it allows you to raise tons of money, get your message out, send out your like daily updates or whatever. And then, you know, so Tom Steyer declares his presidential campaign in July, and then poof, sure enough, the Need to Impeach email list that he'd been accumulating over, you know, almost 2 years converts into his presidential campaign email list, which is exactly what he needed to qualify for the debate. So he gained the DNC's debate rules by getting a sufficient number of small dollar donations, and he used the email list that was generated on deceitful grounds to solicit and gather those donations. It's not like he needed the donations; he's a billionaire. He just needed them to satisfy the DNC's debate criteria, which, by the way, is no longer going to be relevant for the next debates, which allows Bloomberg to enter. So a couple months ago, I actually spoke to Steyer about it briefly, and he claimed that he rented or purchased the email list from himself. So his campaign gave a $300-something thousand payment to the Need to Impeach organization, which he also runs, for the email list. Who knows if that was the market rate? Tom Steyer insisted to me that any other candidate would also have access to the email list, but I'm on the email list. I get about 12 emails a day from it, and no other candidate has made use of this email list, so it's all Tom. And by the way, it's also annoying that Tom self-brands his campaign as Tom 2020, as though Tom is distinctive enough of a name to self-brand with. It's weird because every candidate now, or most of them, seem to go with their first name as their slogan. Tulsi, obviously, Bernie, Pete, Amy, she uses it because Klobuchar is not really the most phonetically soothing last name, I guess. Marianne did it. Corey did it. Beto. Even Hillary did it. It's just weird. I don't know what the cultural or political significance is of everybody sort of transitioning to using their first name as their campaign slogans and messaging and paraphernalia. I'd be a little bit curious to understand what that is. The only one who really doesn't do it is Yang. He doesn't go by Andrew, right? Biden kind of does half and half. Sometimes he does Joe. Sometimes it's just Biden. I don't know. It's odd. Yeah, so I did a short item today on the Steyer stuff where I sort of relayed this whole conversation I had that I had just been sitting on, but the normalization, to use a cliche, or the trend toward making out Tom Steyer to be this benign, friendly figure annoyed me sufficiently that I said, okay, I'm just going to use this old interview that I did and do a short item, because Tom Steyer had the temerity to start launching these TV ads in New Hampshire, where Tom Steyer is saying, "Oh, the Democratic insiders in Washington couldn't get the impeachment of Trump done, and now Trump is even stronger. How terrible! That means we need an outsider like Tom to come in and save the day and be nominated by the Democrats so he can beat Trump." Just like, really, Tom Steyer, of all people in the entire United States, has the least standing to be complaining about impeachment failing. No single private individual, and maybe even public individual, maybe no single individual, period, is more responsible for generating a frenzy around impeachment than Tom Steyer. And he started this, remember, in October 2017. And I'm sure he'd be making sounds about it, making waves about it even before. And it was shrewd in sort of a cold, calculated, amoral way, in that he knew that there was a constituency in the Democratic Party who was really going to be eager for a sort of vessel for their impeachment desires, and he provided that. And he collected tons of extremely valuable data in the process. And so for him now to be simultaneously touting his need to impeach organization, which he did at the debate and he did at his CNN town hall, and then also running ads on TV saying, "Oh, isn't it terrible that impeachment didn't work out? The Democratic insiders blew it. I guess now we need Tom to really take it to Trump." It's just like, that's a pretty epic amount of gall. Tom Steyer's intervention in this race is not quite as ominously oligarchic as Bloomberg, but that's only a function of scale. Bloomberg is several, I want to say, Bloomberg's net worth is what, like 55 billion, and I think Steyer's is 1 to 2 billion, if I'm not mistaken. So you can bet that Steyer would be doing the exact same thing Bloomberg's doing now if he had the resources. But what Steyer's doing is bad enough. He's blanketed South Carolina and Nevada, in particular, with ads, and it's actually worked. So there are polls now that have him in like second or third place in South Carolina and Nevada. So he could get some delegates potentially. And so I just don't. I have little patience for this portrayal of Steyer as this like nice guy. No thanks, Tom. And the reluctance to pin any blame on Tom for the failed impeachment, which is now emboldened Trump, also reflects the total unwillingness to dole out blame to anybody for advocating impeachment, when they knew all along that it was a joke, both on substantive and strategic grounds. But only one who is standing to say, "I told you so" about impeachment is Tulsi. How about that? Estiv says, "Who do you think will drop out next?" Well, Tulsi has said that she's campaigning all the way to the convention, so I have no reason to doubt that. I would think that Biden is not going to drop out till South Carolina. And if he does well in South Carolina, he's going to keep going. Warren is saying that she has this nationwide organization, so I most would assume that she would go to at least Super Tuesday. Pete, I think, is going to stay in for a while. I would, it's not like a sexy answer, but I would expect Michael Bennet to drop out after New Hampshire. Not that most people even knew he was in the first place. Yeah, and somebody, Jillian mentions in the chat, I agree that Tulsi's vote of present was extremely courageous and right, again, on substantive and political grounds. And I know she doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but she does by me. All right, people, thank you for tuning in. It's late, and I still got stuff to do at this hour. So I will talk to you tomorrow at roughly the same time and approximately the same place as we move toward the New Hampshire climax. Alrighty. Bye-bye.